name is Greg Tilson. I'm the Artistic Director with the Kingston Arts Council. And I should also say that this evening is co-presented by Kingston Canadian Film Festival, which, you know, this is a kickoff co-presentation. Its opening night is tomorrow, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that towards the end. And there's information over at the entrance about the festival, and make sure you grab a program on your way out. As I said, Kingston Accommodation Partnership, the City of Kingston's Leading Change Initiative. So this is a series about raising awareness and increasing participation in Kingston's cultural activity. And tonight's discussion focus, of course, is the timely topic of Arts Hubs. And we've just opened the doors to this beautifully renovated Tett Center, and adjacent to the renowned Bader Center, Isabel Bader Center for the Performing Arts. And as I said last night, we had an amazing grand opening here. It was called The Whole Shebang, and it was spectacular. It was one of the best, examples of community-based arts programming that I've seen in a long time. And I think it's an incredible demonstration of what this center is really capable of doing in terms of bringing Kingston artists and the community together in a common space in exciting, inclusive, and creative ways. So, in a minute, we're going to invite our Director of Culture up to say a few words, but before that, we have an award to present. But I would just like to say, Colin Wigington deserves a big round of applause for his strong leadership in helping to make this place a reality. So this space means a lot of different things for a lot of different people who come to participate, not to mention all of the tenants, the artists. Everyone's doing different things, has different mandates, and it's exciting. It creates a really healthy tension here that I'm excited to be a part of. One important part of the Kingston arts community that the Arts Council would like to acknowledge is how we support emerging artists. And I would like to now invite Tina Bailey on behalf of the Community Foundation for Kingston and Area, and Marianne Higgs on behalf of the Nan Yeomans Fund, who will now present the recipient of this year's Nan Yeomans Grant for Artistic Development. Please welcome.
It gives me great pleasure, I'm Marianne, it's Tina. It gives me great pleasure to be able to kick off tonight's event with this award. The Yeomans Fund, Nan Yeomans Fund, has been with the Community Foundation for a number of years, and it's her savings and also from the sale of some of her art. Some of the art is still held back for another gala, another time. But Nan was a diminutive lady who lived to be 82. She was dedicated to the community, and she loved art for art's sake, and she specialized in certain media, including ones like this one I brought tonight to gift to our award winner. And I think what we want you to know about Nan is that she would want all of you to keep thinking about how you bring along other artists, and it gave her great pleasure when she did her will planning to think that her monies would go towards aspiring artists. And with the help of the Community Foundation and Kingston Arts Council, we've been able to have juried awards each year, and wonderful recipients have had their careers improved by this injection of cash of $2,500 each year. I think that's enough about Nan Yeomans for now, but you will hear about her again. We do like people to keep her in their memory, and you can Google her and find out more about her. So from humble beginnings, she gave very generously to her community and is a good model for all of us. So now, without further ado, Tina has the envelope. Awesome.
Anyway, it is my great pleasure to announce this year's Kingston-based filmmaker Leanne Belby.
She's a filmmaker, and the name of Nan's art piece is called Upshot.
And it's beautiful. Just I'm going to say a couple of quick words. First of all, thank you so much to the Nan Yeomans Fund, the Kingston Arts Council, and community foundations. This is incredible for me. I've been making films in Kingston for the past 5 years. I've shot 3 shorts and 1 feature film, which you can see the poster up over there. It's premiering at the Kingston Film Festival on Saturday, 7/15. And for all of those movies, I've had to rent gear. For the past year, I've started to build up my own gear, and the hope being that the next time I make a project that I don't have to spend a ton of money and spend a lot of time procuring gear from elsewhere, that we can just go out and make a movie. And what this grant is going to allow me to do is buy a good camera. So that's the last piece of the puzzle. I'm going to have a great camera now to be able to shoot my next movie, which is really exciting because, as you said, Nan Yeomans wanted to help other artists, and every time you make a movie, you're involving dozens of other artists, and had 10 actors and multiple extras and cinematographers. There's so many people involved in making a movie. So although this is a grant to help me, it's a grant to help everyone involved in every one of my productions, and that's very exciting. Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Leanne. And now another warm welcome for our Director of Culture, Colin Wigginton.
Figure out what to say about Greg. He is in many ways the glue that binds this community together, and I appreciate the shout out, but really it's because of you that our art scene here in Kingston is as phenomenal as it is, and it's so exciting to me. I feel almost breathless tonight to see this room jammed with so many people, because for me it's really about trying to set up the conditions to allow these things to happen, and I prefer to sort of step back once that's happened. But I appreciate the acknowledgement. Last night, for those of you who were here, or for those of you who weren't, we had a lovely sort of introduction to the Tett Center from Shannon Brown. She had some very nice words to say, and that kind of prepared speech. I meant to write some words down, I ran out of time today, so this is off the cuff. But a couple of things that I just wanted to say, and this goes back to my comment a moment ago about creating the conditions. For me now in my role as cultural director, which I assumed last summer in an official capacity, it really is about working with my team in cultural services and senior staff at the city and the support of council to figure out what we can do to put the pieces in place that make these kinds of things possible. In the case of the Tett Center, this has been about revitalizing a building that had already asserted itself as a creative hub in the community and had done for many decades. And really it was about trying to take a building that had been let go derelict and turn it into something that was safe. So, bringing it to code, putting this steel structure in place so if there's an earthquake, the building doesn't fall down. And, it's been wonderful that we've been able to do it, I think, in a very beautiful way. But for me, in looking at the design of the building, I do hope that it takes a back seat or, provides the blank canvas for all the activity that's already starting to happen here. And I would like to say that, or think that that's kind of what we're doing across all of our endeavors, whether it's through things like the City of Kingston Arts Fund, the City of Kingston Heritage Fund, working with service level agreements with groups like the Kingston Arts Council, the Kingston Association of Museums. We really want to invest in the ability of others to do their work and to do it as well as they can. So that was a big part of the Kingston Culture Plan, if you remember, way back in 2010. That one of the big pieces for us was building capacity. And actually this event and this notion of leading change really comes out of that, because one of the things that we wanted to try and do was to build bridges, build relationships, not just within the arts community, but between the arts and the public sector and the arts and the business sector. And I think it's really phenomenal, and actually someone who deserves a round of applause tonight is Karen Dolan for the initiative that she took to seek funding through the Ontario government for a project called Where Art Meets Business. And that's really what's brought us here tonight to continue that discussion. And as the slide shows, this notion of leading change is really about fostering a series of discussions. Started last night, continuing tonight, and hopefully will continue on in the months and years to come. And you know, I, like many of you who were here last night, probably left the discussion with a lot of ideas, a lot of things that you're rolling around in your head. I haven't actually been able to let it go myself, thinking about some of the issues that were raised last night. And what really struck me was about trying to level the playing field. There was and this is my take on last night, there was a little bit of a sense of a power imbalance. I thought that came through the presentation from Musa Geddes about this notion of going into community, working with the community, and it didn't to me seem as equitable. And I think what's really important for us to all keep in mind is that we're all partners in this endeavor. And I think what's been really interesting about the work that's emerged from Where Art Meets Business is the discussions around, it's not just about the arts going to business to take, it's about the two different sectors coming together and working equally. They both have things to contribute, and hopefully we'll experience mutual benefit out of that. And I think that's an idea that will come through very clearly tonight. And in my former life, before coming back to Kingston, I was working at the Art Gallery of Ontario and was in Toronto for about 4 years. And someone whose paths I crossed with is Christina Zeiger, who you'll have the chance to hear speak tonight. And for me, that really represents her work, how you can create space in a community through things like 401 Richmond and the Gladstone Hotel, where a business can be a leader and that they can pursue what it is that they need to do, but create the conditions for the kind of artistic expression that can happen, and I think step out of the way as well. So, you know, I think this is a really exciting opportunity to continue the discussion. So pleased, as I said, to see such a jam-packed room of people. Looking forward to tonight's performance and the continuing discussion. So thank you all for being here tonight, and let's just continue to make Kingston the best place that we can together. So thank you.
I wish I could speak off the cuff like that. So we had a really good format last night where we had a marimba set up here and a taiko drum, and the performer Kyoko Ogura, she blew our minds. And it was great because she played throughout the evening in between the speakers, and we're going to do that again. It seems to work. And so an important question that I think we'd like to ask you tonight is how we can, or one of the questions we'd like to ask is how we can best foster artist and community collaboration in arts hubs such as the Tett. I think that's an important question. And our featured performer tonight, artist Danielle Lennon, and her new project entitled String Theory is a very impressive demonstration of collaboration. Danielle Lennon is a violinist with a diverse background in numerous styles of music. She is a member of the Kingston Symphony, plays with various Kingston bands, and works as a studio musician. Her first solo album, String Theory, is a collection of 8 compositions that represent the diverse musical styles and experiences that have influenced her artistic journey up to this point in her 20-year career. And the musicians performing with Danielle tonight are Danielle on violin, Lisa Draper on violin, Venetia Gauthier on violin, Sarah King McCord on cello, Ashley Vanstone on piano, and Andy Love on percussion. And what is extra special about this collaborative project is that Danielle also commissioned 8 local film artists to create works of art for each of the 8 songs on the album, some of which you will see projected throughout the evening. And so, so you guys really got to see this back there. If you can, you know, feel free to stand over by the catering, because we got to see this. This is amazing art before your very eyes. Daniel will now perform songs with some of the following film artists: Strathspey by Melinda Richka, right? This is right? 29, 12, 11 by Julia Krolik and Owen Fernley, and Full Rotation by film artist Brent Nurse. Great. Please welcome Danielle Lennon of String Theory. it's working again. It's just like opening up the other part of my brain, which is really helpful tonight. So last night we had a wonderful discussion, as Colin mentioned, on a lot of different things. For me, we touched on a lot of importance of how we make these spaces welcoming and not intimidating and inclusive, and all the work that takes, and all the really long periods of investing in relationships. Tonight I think we can continue to talk about those themes and maybe just nudge the conversation a little bit in the direction of what arts hubs like the Tett Center, NGB Studios, even Kingston's downtown core can do for Kingston and can do for our visitors. So just nudging in a little bit into talking about the local economy and that kind of thing. I think that's also an important discussion, in addition to the themes that came out last night. Our guest keynote speaker tonight is here to help inspire us about what might be possible in Kingston. Christina Zeidler is a very special creative collaborator, a film artist, a musician, a developer and president of the historic Gladstone Hotel in Toronto. In partnership with the Kingston Canadian Film Festival, she has generously agreed to share her community-based approach for creating arts hubs and how they can provide instant access to local arts scenes. So I had the pleasure, and Christine was kind enough to put myself and Annie and baby George up at a hotel last week, which was amazing. Probably wouldn't have had the opportunity otherwise, and it was a real treat. It's the oldest continuing operating Toronto hotel, the oldest. A beautiful heritage building that helped provide my family with an amazing experience of a thriving arts hub. I think that it was a historic building is significant, considering where we live now, right? where we live in Kingston. And I think the combination of these local artist-designed rooms, which she's going to talk about, ongoing diverse hotel programming throughout the entire building, which included a fashion show on the second floor during our stay, and being able to walk just 2 blocks into the vibrant Queen West district. For example, we went to see the Douglas Copeland, much talked about exhibit at the Museum of Contemporary Canadian Art. We also got to see an old Kingston friend, Suki, at the Edward Day Gallery, which was a treat. And it gave us a sense of what it's like to live in that neighborhood. I think that was achieved. And I think it gave gave me a glimpse of some directions that Kingston might be headed. One thing that comes to mind specifically is the local example of the Frontenac Club Inn. And just finished a run of a co-presentation with Theatre Kingston, which was really cool. I want to hear more about that tonight, I hope. And are about ongoing exhibits. There's a spring exhibit coming up that I've been speaking with Susan about, a local photographer named Bernard Clark, who happens to be taking our photos as we speak. On that note, actually, a little housekeeping. If anyone is not comfortable with having their photo taken or whatever, please come and talk to me, and we can work that out. Anyway, sorry I'm talking so much. So I hope we can spark lots of ideas tonight for collaborative ways and emerging arts hubs in Kingston can help build community through arts and heritage. Please join me in a warm Kingston welcome for our keynote speaker, Christina Zeidler.
Hello. I feel like I have nothing to tell you people. This is the most amazing space. What a beautiful place. And to have this wonderful music, and there's films going on, and somebody received an award, and what am I doing? So I am going to be talking about the Gladstone. I've been running the Gladstone since 2003. And so this talk is going to be a little bit like, a little me, but hopefully that will be, not me, Gladstone. But hopefully that I can use this example to be a broader example to all of you, and that it can open up a discussion later. I want to talk a little bit about this sort of unique idea of an arts hub and a business conjoined. and how, you know, these complications of drawing major development and what happened to our little neighborhood. How to continue, like it's now been 12 years, how do you foster business in an ongoing way? You know, you had your opening a month ago, and what will it look like to be here in 12 years? It happens. I didn't think it happened, but it does. So this is the beautiful Gladstone Hotel in downtown Toronto. It was built in 1890. So we had our 125th anniversary. How amazing. And it's been operating since then. There's a million and trillion stories at the Gladstone Hotel, so I'm trying to weave one more or less cohesive story for tonight. So we'll skip over many things. This has been my credo. The wonderful Jane Jacobs, urban thinker, talked about this idea of new ideas must use old buildings. And this, I think that you guys know about this, I don't need to tell you. But it certainly was the way that I first was able to navigate this initial challenge, this existing old building and really a crumbling business and facility. It was really in some rough shape to begin with. So here it is, I don't exactly know the date here, does it say somewhere there? But the only reason this picture was taken was because they were building that bridge, that railway bridge. So it's these engineering pictures that you get. You see the Gladstone in the distance there, and there's 3 other hotels around it, and that was the Parkdale train station. So it was the last stop before you went to Hamilton. You probably came from Kingston. And this is the sort of internet superhighway of the day, right, the railway. So that's why we existed. And so here we are, sort of circa, what do we think those cars are? 80s, 70s? Some 70s, okay, I'll take it. So you can see that the facade was really changed. It was all bricked in because of licensing rules at the time. And the Gladstone had really fallen on hard times. So this photograph was taken literally about a week after I started working at the Gladstone. This was not, and it was an existing hotel with people in it. So it was not a condition like, oh, hey, here's a raw space. It was intense. These were examples of some of the hotel rooms. As you can see, there is a deep sort of sadness to the space, and yet there is also a real soul to the space. So these things existed together. But it was in really terrible disrepair. And when I started, these were derelict spaces upstairs, but people were living in them. So they were living sort of week to week. They were SROs, de facto SROs, so single resident occupancy. And what I was trying to do at first was just to clean up the space, very basic things. And I was going to just activate the downstairs bars. Here it is, 2003, looking like 1920. And this is actually one of the old railway workers, because they used to come and drink at the bar. And Gladstone was famous for being like, oh, my uncle used to drink. And, you know, or I had to go down and get my father out of there before he drank away the paycheck. That's also what you hear a lot of stories of, and part of our history. Now, this is one of my favorite pictures. So there's the long, the building eventually, as you saw, those pictures of the burnt out. We were given 6 months by the inspector to replace all of the electrical in the building. Our boiler broke in half. I mean, you can see the condition of the building. I had sort of rose-colored glasses riveted on when I started and was like, oh, this is clean after. No, it was actually a much bigger thing. So this was one of the last rooms we got to, our wonderful Melody Bar. And it actually, the beam broke like chunk at one point. And my favorite part of this picture is that Murphy is still drinking. Well, above him is disaster. So this is part of what was crazy about the Gladstone, and I'll start to show you pictures of what it looks like now. But it was really that we didn't stop operating. We had to negotiate all of these relationships with the Gladstone historic, the Gladstone recent, the Gladstone future, all together, weaving these difficult and yet really rewarding relationships. This is one of my place ever. And that's sort of, this picture always sums up the Gladstone still, maybe. Just the cheekiness to the whole thing. But that was just a found piece of graffiti in one of the rooms. So in my initial I come from an artist background. You mentioned 401 Richmond, which is actually my sister's building. I should have a picture of my sister. But she developed an arts hub at 401 Richmond, which is much like this space actually, but from the private sector rather than from the public sector. So she runs it as a business. So you can see actually Jane Jacobs is there with her trying to listen, and that's David Miller, and all these amazing people converging at the Gladstone. This is really 12 years ago, so this is at the beginning of our history, and these are all pictures before we renovated. So this was all happening all at once. And to do it at the Gladstone was sort of this cheeky way, come in and have your event at the Gladstone, because other people were doing it at the Gladstone too, and there was sort of history going on. This is just going to quickly fly you through the renovation, which was a lot more painful than it looks like here. But you can see that there's our hand-operated elevator, which we ended up pulling. It had been all cemented in, and we pulled it apart, and there's the hallways getting, it was huge and massive and crazy, and there were dance parties and weddings and people living and all kinds of crazy things happening at the same time. And this, I just wanted to put this picture in because I thought it was hilarious. I forgot about, we had a party for all the people who did the beautiful restoration work on the hotel, and gave them a cake. I like a picture of a cake. So here is the, ta-da, here it is. And being really a vital part of the neighborhood. So what I wanted to talk about, I just need to blast you through that part just so you saw sort of what happened. But I wanted to mention that in that time, as much as we were doing this sort of massive renovation, who we were relying on and who we were drawing in, the reason we didn't close is because we wanted to stay connected to our community. And that I think the arts community is very unique in its ability to not be afraid of challenging social conditions, to not be afraid of derelict space, to see yourself as a partner in development rather than a group that comes in and erases development. And that is such a loaded statement. We can all unpack it later, and I will talk about it more. But that is really sort of the key important part of what the Gladstone represents. I think that I'm going to now bring you into what I think is sort of this really, so fast forward sort of 10 years now, we have a very operating business. And one of the things we do a lot of now is weddings. And I thought that the weddings were sort of an interesting thing because for me as an artist, the way I think of a wedding is like a giant performance art night. And so people take on that role of bride and groom in whatever shape or whatever, and they get to have their night at the hotel. And I think that that's really wonderful. It's a way that people participate in art in their lives where they might not actually think of themselves as being performance artists, but yet they are. And one of the things that is great about the Gladstone is that it's an old building and you bring your new idea. And I like that idea as like a battle cry for the wedding. So, sorry, I'm skipping through now. I forgot about these slides. This is sort of the kind of new, like, do it with us credo, but this is sort of the various things that we do. So here we are at the weddings. You can see all the different ideas that people have. I mean, they're so creative and fun. And you know, this couple is like having their wedding, and we happen to have an art show behind them, so they get into it and get inspired by it. You know, utilizing all of the spaces in the hotel. So I thought it was kind of a fun way to look at how people are experiencing art now in this kind of unique way. So for me, some of the words I'm going to use tonight came from actually a branding exercise that we did with some fantastic people. And they started to get us to think about our values. Like if we thought about ourselves as just like, oh, we're an arts hub. Well, that's the standard. That's what we are. But what are the unique pieces of what we do? And I think one of the real, the deep value of the Gladstone is that it's a beacon. It's a place that we're representing a place where you can not know anything about Toronto or the arts or the Gladstone, and you can show up and we will take you in and we will show you around. We're like that physical space that you can come to. So there's the beacon. And certainly now, Queen West has become known as like a major arts hub. Here it is, again, these pictures I think were taken in the 80s from the roof of the Gladstone. And I just thought they were sort of an interesting thing to look at. Our area has changed so immensely. There's been major development that has been drawn in, but I think the arts community has done a lot to embrace that. And just recently, we were voted the #2 on Vogue's list of districts. But this is kind of amazing that this local place has been sort of recognized internationally. And sort of, sorry, to remember that it wasn't just like an overnight thing, that this was something that was built over time. I wanted to also just say that that this local piece is so important. Local can sometimes be used as a pejorative, and it drives me insane. I feel like local is a lightning rod. It's the thing that brings everybody together, and then when you have that specificity, that thing, then you can draw many people to it. And I think that's what's sort of nice about this recognition, and I think it's something that certainly you can look to in any community. What is special about your community? How are you a lightning rod to other people to come to you, or a place for discussion to go out from? Certainly also in this beacon, these ambassadors to Queen West are our staff. Our staff are incredible, and they're part of who came along with us through all these transitions. This is Rob. You come to the hotel, he will take you up in the elevator. And I'll mention it later, but we've dedicated our elevator to the Gladstone Cowboy, and I'll talk about him later. That's Anne, and these are people who also helped to, that's not the greatest picture of Anne, but that's her at her 65th, and all of the staffs are young and old. This was taken, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, but you know, sort of all coming around. And Anne had been at the hotel for almost 20 years, so she was one of the people who also was able to keep their cool and bring people with them and deal with really immense change. And that's Alicia. She's going to give you a beer. And just some random celebrities. That's Facelift and Fluffy Souffle. Star sighting. The other, and it brings me to this idea of alchemy, that the Gladstone is sort of has become sort of a de facto arts hub for the city. It's not a not-for-profit space, it's a business space. But because we are a business and we have hotel and bars and restaurants, people are coming in and through, and we're able to, and because also as a hotel we're unique in the sense that we are open 24/7. There's always something happening. So there's a lot of room for a lot of different communities to come together. And I just want to freak you out by that. I could have taken a million pictures, but this was just from, this is from our Twitter feed, and some oldies but goodies I threw in, Jack Layton and Olivia, you know. I think this idea of the Gladstone being a reflection of the microcosm of Toronto. Toronto is an incredibly diverse city, and we are conscious of trying to create a space where many different people are coming for different reasons, and they're gonna, like, you're gonna run into the burlesque performer. Well, you know, I don't know, you're at the Team Brandon, Jason Priestley night, trivia night, or, you know, there's gonna be all these things that you couldn't expect happening. Another sort of example of this bringing together two different ideas is our annual design show called Come Up to My Room. And this show is a design show, but it really is approached from an artistic, visual arts dimension. So on our, it's inviting artists to come and transform the hotel. So this image is actually a video projection on the hotel that was architecturally, you know, now they have this amazing technology where you can build out the video, and it was changing, but specifically responding to the art. I mean, just wonderful, beautiful, amazing. But when I went to art school, we were taught to hate the design students. I was like, you'll never mix their evil corporate, you know, I don't know, and we're artists. And I can't believe how much we share. So I just want to show you just quickly, this is the quick schematic of the building, and I'll bring you back to it again, but this show mainly happens on our second floor, which is former hotel rooms, as you can see, but we use it as flex space, so that's where this art show happens, and many other art shows. But as you can see, there are real transformations, and we've been doing this show now for 12 years. So you can sort of imagine the, just the amount of imagination, you know, artistry, design, and this is sort of, and on our 10th anniversary, we tried to take a picture of all the artists who've been involved, and we made them wear graduation caps. They're graduates now. So I think it's in those sort of like surprising moments of things colliding and people coming together and building something over time. I want to think about the idea of wild space. So this one's a little bit abstract. So in a business like a hotel, it's so expensive to run a hotel, you just can't, I mean, for those of you who run small businesses, little tears will squeeze out of the sides of your eyes when I talk about this. It's very expensive to run a hotel. You're nodding vigorously. So it becomes very hard to maintain this idea of wild space. For me, wild space is part of a mix of elements that is needed, I think, for really interesting things to be happening. So I like the idea of, we were sort of challenged with like such expensive space, how do you create something unexpected, wild space? You know, we have hotel rooms, we have restaurants, we have, you know, 65 staff, you know, how are you gonna just like let things happen? And I think one of the sort of interesting things that we were presented with in the building again was these generous wide hallways, and you can see them in purple there. They're unique to an old style of building where you would have more public space than you would have private space. And especially in a hotel, hotels aren't built like that anymore. You have very generous private space and you run through the tunnel to get to the elevator. Whereas our hotel has those generous public spaces. So we were able to, this is it at its most conservative now. But you can see, I mean, that's a really grand, huge space. So we are This is a picture from one of the Come Up to My Rooms, but you can see there, you know, it's party space. We've also done art shows and theater shows and, you know, total transformations. This is an installation in one of the hallways that completely changes it. And really inviting artists to come in and activate those spaces. But also that, you know, between, you know, being in your hotel room and, you know, having a coffee downstairs, because these these public spaces by the hotel rooms are open during the day, from 12 to 5 for public viewing, that in those spaces that you might run into somebody that you wouldn't expect to run into and have an unexpected conversation or something surprising happens. And I think that's a really unique idea, because mostly the idea in business is you just maximize your business space, and now actually there's a new trend in hotels where they are trying to make these public rooms. So it's actually kind of the pendulum is swinging with all the talk of everything social, social, social. Sorry, I said that really mean, didn't I? I didn't mean to say it like that. I just meant there's like, people are thinking about social space more than they used to. Oop, did I mean to do it? Yes, I did. So part of this idea of wild space or doing things differently was also this bringing along of old Parkdale with new Parkdale. And this is the famous Gladstone cowboy who I promised I would mention, Hank. And Hank used to sing karaoke every Saturday, and he'd sing, "Hey, hey, good looking." And when we reopened the hotel, we needed somebody to operate our hand-operated elevator, and we asked Hank to come in, and Hank was just made for the job. He loved to be there. He made it, he bequeathed himself the Gladstone cowboy, created a logo for himself, and he was just the life of a huge part of the Gladstone. He would ride the elevator up and down. When there was a wedding, he would dress in all white cowboy regalia, and he was always there for all the guests coming to see art shows and take them around. And unfortunately, Hank passed away in 2009, which we were very devastated. And we named the elevator after him. But Hank really represented somebody who was a Parkdale icon, really finding his place in the arts world, and the arts world finding, like creating a bridge, but he was a bridge. And that's actually Sherry Patterson, who is a farmer and who has a farm that we did, we shared in her agriculture, so we did a CSA with her she's a very close friend. And I want to talk about the idea of risk. So I think that in general, creatives, I think that any of us here understand the idea of risk, and that it's something that's always present. I think for any sort of creative person, whatever you have in your brain didn't exist before, and making it a reality for other people is a massive leap of faith. So if you don't believe in it, other people won't believe in it because it didn't exist before. So it's a very difficult thing for artists to be constantly modeling. But I think that I feel the same way for small business, as well. So I'm often go into shops, thank you for existing. It's very hard to do these things. They didn't exist before. You put a lot out on the line to be there. And I think that's somewhere where small business and artists share. But once you've modeled something, it exists for everybody, and it can be a point and an example. And I have benefited from many people being very generous and showing me the examples of their projects and finding out about other projects, and that giving me strength to think about the next step, just one step at a time. So we, the famous artist designed room project, was part of our revitalization. And for me, as a visual artist, when I thought of taking on 37 hotel rooms, I really, I could have said, well, I'm a designer and artist. This absolutely great. But for me, that just didn't sound as much fun as inviting 37 people to come together and create different visions. And what I think is so special about that was that each artist really thought about their room, and because it's a historic hotel and there's little nooks and crannies and everything is idiosyncratic, actually having one person just think about one room became an advantage. So that's the Canadiana room, this is the Bruno Billio room, and Bruno actually lives in the hotel, and he repurposed some of our old antiques into new furniture for this wonderful room. You can see that the work is really, really diverse and different. And this was, as you talked about, that respect for artists and what they bring into a project and creating sort of a mutually beneficial relationship. So when bringing in the artist was very good for us, but it was also very good for the artist. And it was making sure that that was equitable on both sides. That's the room that my mother and I designed. With your mother before, she's amazing. But I reverted to a 10-year-old when we did this. And this is, it was a collaboration between a furniture designer and a fabric designer. And then the parlor of Twilight. So there's lots of, I mean, each room there's 37 and they're all different. But what is so unique about them, it wasn't just art on the walls, the artist created a whole world. Now, I think in talking about that risk piece, was that anytime I took a risk on doing a community project, it's always been successful. It's like the thing I learned after 12 years was like, those are the things that worked out. Like, and sometimes when you take these huge risks when you're starting something, and then after that you're like so overwhelmed by it. Well, I was. That sometimes then I was really cautious after that, like, oh, well, I don't know. And then I had to tap back into that trust in myself and in my community, that when I relied on my community, when we do something together, it always works out. You know, it's never perfect, nothing ever is perfect, but that it's going somewhere, it has a mission, it has a purpose, and it manifests. So one of the sort of last things that I want to talk to you about, and the only thing I could think of is a really direct title, respect, was this idea of, it's really the people who activate a space. I'm an artist, a designer, I believe in bricks and mortar. You know, my father's an architect. I come from thinking about design and urbanism and the built form, but really what makes things happen, what makes them great, is the activation of a space. And we can see through many examples when an amazing thing was built, but it doesn't have the people to activate it, how it can fall apart and become a non-vital space rather than a vital space. And in my experience, the community has been that glue. Part of what I was trying to do when I was doing the Gladstone was to posit the idea that art is necessary, that it's not a sideline fluff to be ignored. Oh, it would be nice if you could have the art. You know, to imagine it as being an essential ingredient. Like, as much as you need bricks and mortar, you need artists. That it's necessary to growth. This is an amazing example. This just happened in the fall. So this is Shepard Fairey, who's a well-known street artist who's worked all over the world, and he did the President Obama campaign posters, the Hope image, yeah. And he was doing some projects in Toronto, and one of the projects was the people who had generously funded him to come to the city allowed him to pick a place where he could do a gift to the city, and through magical forces, he picked the Gladstone. And this was a really wonderful, I had been waiting, the back of the building was touched, and I was like, kept waiting for something to happen, and then this sort of magical thing happened, came out of it. So this community of creatives and of people has been our deep foundation. And artists have networks because they have to. They cannot exist in isolation. No artist exists in isolation. And maybe they do, but that, if they do, it can be a very lost art, like somebody discover, oh, look what we found. But most artists have to engage with each other in order to have any economy or value or life. And they're often sensitive to existing communities because they have to exist side by side with them. They can't exist without them. So when artists come into a new area, I think that there are incredible opportunities to make things work that might not work in other places. So instead of gentrification model, that a revitalization model is possible. And artists are often, and other people are often at risk of being pushed out by a larger development company coming in, and that certainly happened in West Queen West. But the community really rallied around and negotiated for a place to stay within the community. And they rallied not only for artists, but they also rallied, you know, we have the CAMH in our area, we have a lot of mental health services in our area, and we all fought to protect and keep those things. So the story's not over yet, but these things that don't often happen in many areas, like if an area becomes hip, like Yorkville's a good example, it became very hip, and like, boom, everyone was pushed out. Whereas Queen West and Parkdale, there's still a discussion going on, and there's stakeholders at the table. Now this is a high school student. You could maybe say a mental health patient. No, just a high school student. This is Oasis Skateboard Factory, and they've done many shows at the Gladstone Hotel, and over years we've developed a really great tie with them. And unbeknownst to us, they manufacture skateboards and get amazing kids through high school through doing this business come high school model. And they made us this amazing deck. So I just wanted to show that picture because we were chuffed. But the Gladstone continues to really be a life force within Queen West. It continues to be a hub in the city. And that hub is regenerative. It's not just taking, it's also part of developing something and giving something back. We've been able to, through being an arts hub, a reactive, active space, been able to handle how many times our business has changed in the last 10 years. So I would say there's been a total overhaul of clientele within the immediate area 4 times within my 10 years there, which would flatten many businesses. But that ability to be adaptive, to have built really strong ties with many people across the city has helped us be surviving. And I wanted to sort of just leave you with sort of the sort of conundrum where I am often at when I'm asked sort of about this question about arts and business. And I honestly don't know, in our case, they're so intertwined that I don't know if I could ever pull them apart. It would be impossible for me to say, oh, well, if we, at this point, if we got rid of all the arts programming, sure, we'd probably have a wedding business, and there would be things that would exist. But I really can't say with the kinds of numbers that we bring in through the arts and through how it feeds and regenerates our business, how they could exist without each other anymore. And this becomes a real, the times when I face it the most is when we're looking at the bottom line, and arts becomes a line item, and it becomes very, and I'm dealing with staff, people I've put in charge to help me run the business, and we have to look at that, and it becomes a very cold moment. It's like, ooh, that's expensive. You know, we don't rely on any arts funding. It's all done on the backs of hotel rooms and beers and weddings, but it also feeds all of that. So it can't be said that it's on the backs of it. So this part for me is now, I wanted to like give you a little picture of our green wall, because to me it's now an ecosystem, like they exist together now completely. And I just want to take you back to, this was when I started in 2003, and I love this photograph because that exact view has changed so dramatically. There's something like 400 million condo units there. And no, that's an exaggeration. But I think it's somewhere close to 5,000 units within our square, or triangle. But this sort of dreamery moment of looking out and being like, gee, you know, could we take that first step? Could we do that? And this was not done by us. This was done by an artist. But I love this so much because I do believe that running arts and business, the rewards come not from, you know, I mean, running a hotel is an expensive business. Running arts, they're expensive businesses. They don't come in like, you know, they're not always bottom line rewards. You have to maintain a healthy bottom line to have an existing business, but more than anything, you have to believe in your space to make it work. And if you can make those things happen, you have something that's really healthy and that is part of not just the lifeblood of your own business, but the lifeblood of your city. So that's my speech.
That was great. And I'm sure you all have, or some of you have some responses and questions, and so keep those in mind. In a second, in a few minutes, we're going to bring up the house lights and hopefully have a nice open discussion and share some stories and questions for Christina. And you know, catering, Washington's just down the hall, as I mentioned before. But anyway, we're going to get back to the music. And before we do that, and you know, wake up that other part of our brain. And so while we're listening to this next performance, think about, you know, how Kingston relates to the stories that Christina was sharing with us, and I really want to encourage you to share your stories. So I guess we should give another. Where's the drummer? There he is. What about the piano player? Yeah, maybe a drum just for Ashley. And Ashley, well, and all the performers of string theory, please welcome them back to the stage. greatest thing is they're not finished yet. So this is how it's going to roll. We're going to bring the house lights up, and Jesse's going to pass me the microphone, the wireless microphone, which I'm kind of terrified of for a couple of reasons. I guess one, you know, I have no idea how to do this moderated discussion thing. I'm not very good at it, but you know, the way I see it, two things can happen. One is nobody says anything. No, wait. First, I think is everyone puts their hand up. That would be great. If that's the case, you know, if there's lots of people talking, please, you know, be respectful and try not to talk too much. The other thing that happens is no one says anything, and then if that happens, please take pity on me and just, you know, think of something to say. But fortunately, we've got a couple of people who are going to help the conversation get started. But yeah, this would be a good time. Not everyone at once, please. But you know, if you need to use the washroom, you've been a wonderful audience. Great. Doesn't everyone think it's been a great audience? Andy, don't you think it's been great? Yeah. So we're going to kind of relax now a little bit. Does this thing work? Okay. So I just wanted to start a conversation on you know, thinking about what Christina has said and thinking about our experience in Kingston now, and you know, some questions and some shared stories. That would be great. And it's okay maybe with Susan, she's kind of hiding. You know, it'd be great to hear a short little, yeah, and there's a hand already. Okay, good. But a great little story about maybe your experience so far with art programming. Is that all right, Susan? Susan Shaw from the Frontenac Inn Club.
I actually, is this working?
Yep.
Yeah. I actually want to just go, wow, wow, wow. Very interesting. I want to tell you the first time I really got to know the Gladstone. I moved here from Parkdale, my husband and I. And we moved to Parkdale in the late 70s and then moved to Kingston in the late 90s. And I worked at Parkdale Community Legal Services and Parkdale Community Health Center. And so there was a lot of community activism, a lot of political work. And one of the things I remember when I was working at Parkdale Community Health Center was celebrating workers in a factory, and I'm trying to think of the name of it now, but I think they made rubber tires. And men and women worked together on the line, and it was just very cool. And then suddenly the factory closed, and all these people in Parkdale who had been workers and had really good, solid jobs, there was nothing for them. Now, when we met these people through the health center and some work we were doing around workplace safety and got talking to them about what it was like for them, I won't be much longer, but I just want to put this into context. Somebody wrote a book, someone took photographs, and we had a huge celebration at the Gladstone, and I have a feeling Hank might have been there. And these folks who were in their 70s, 80s, and 90s came out to the Gladstone, surrounded by kind of community activists and people like that, all living in Parkdale and then under the bridge along Queen Street area. And I remember thinking, what is this crazy place? And I got to know the two brothers.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy brothers who owned the place. But it was after that that people came to the Gladstone, and it truly did absolutely save community. And I know after municipal elections, and I was pretty good friends with David Miller, and people would show up to the Gladstone and have their drinks because of either a victory of a progressive person being elected, or were sad and thought, we'll come back next time. But I remember it being such a solid part of the community, and I am so moved by all the things that you were saying, because for some reason, I'm not sure what water we were all drinking in Parkdale, but by golly, Bear and I left Parkdale and moved here and opened the Frontenac Club Inn without any knowledge of how to do this. 3 years plus and ongoing renovations. And I've been feeling lately, we've been feeling, I'll be 65 in a few days, and I think we were just sort of feeling, we don't want this just to be about the bottom line of business. So I'm looking to find a way to be more involved within the community and in terms of the arts community, and have been very grateful that, and I'm wondering if Brent is here.
No, he can't look after his children.
Oh, well, that's not a great excuse. Bring them with you, because no, he said that he would be here tonight. We kind of spontaneously were told we might have to say a few things. And I wanted to share this with Brent, but we just decided that we were going to do this play at the Frontenac Club Inn. And as usual, my enthusiasm takes over. Well, how hard could that be? This is fantastic. And so we embarked upon this journey with minimal planning, with not thinking what could possibly go wrong, but what is going to go right. And then we got our dates confused, so I was off to London and Liverpool while they came in. And I understand for those people who saw the play and came to Frontenac, you enjoyed it. We were very happy to do this. It had significant repercussions when you're running a business. I had people who asked for their money back because they couldn't get into the main room to sit and listen to jazz and read and have their glass of wine because some play was going on in there and there were people everywhere. We had other complaints, but primarily the response from our guests and from our community was very positive. And but I learned a lot from that experience, that when business combines with art and wants to do something together, there has to be more than just looking at the bottom line. For me, there has to be an understanding from both sides. And I have learned a lot. And I'm going to be going to Karen and say, we need to do contracts, we need to look at insurance, we need to look at all those things, but make that a minimum part of what we have to do, because I just want more and more things to happen at the Frontenac Club Inn. And as a member of the Kingston Combination Partners, who are all here as well, they've got venues, let's use them. So Murray's our guy, he's going to make that happen too. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Steve. Sorry to put you on the spot. Do you want to reset? There's a question.
No, that was...
Clark, do you have a question?
No, just briefly, so I work next door, and I've been involved in designing, which was on the committee that helped design the Isabel. I've been involved in the Tett for a long time, and I have a direct response to this presentation. I just want to express my frustration over the fact that there is no food down here. This is insanity. And not only no food, there's no drinks of the alcoholic kind. And it seems to me that if we want a warm place, a place where people want to come and spend time, there has to be good food and good coffee and good drink. Anyway, that's all I need to say.
This might be another good time to, here than here, and I'm really glad that Tricia Ballman, the director of the Isabel Bader for the Performing Arts, has a few words to say.
Christina, I really appreciate what you told us tonight. And I remember just before coming to the Isabel, I worked on a 1889 building at Trinity St. Paul's. And you talked with it with such passion. And I remember when I first came in to the Tett Center, John Mirsky took me around and he talked with the passion that you had. And you could tell that some buildings just have soul. Your building has soul, the Tett Center has soul. And we just got this great opportunity with this hub for everybody to work together. But it takes that kind of vision. And I just really appreciate the vision that you brought to us. Thank you very much.
You want the microphone?
It feels like this
I'm gonna
game
start,
show.
You want to catch it? I will just pass it over.
Hi. Oh, it's weird to hear myself loud, like I'm in my own head. My name is Sandra Jass, and I'll tell two quick stories, and then I'll pose my question more to the group than to Christine per se. I have a serendipitous connection to the Gladstone and to the Frontenac Club Inn. My serendipitous connection to the Gladstone is that for years I was on the board of Carfax, Ontario, and towards the end of my tenure we had our annual general meeting at the Gladstone. So I got to stay in one of those rooms, and every board member got to stay in one of those rooms, and it was really fabulous. And it was, I think, the year you opened the house.
Yeah, it was like
the
you were the first group.
Yeah. And Vera Frankel was one of our keynote speakers then, and then she came to Kingston. And so it was a very exciting place, and of course the offices of CARFAC Ontario, which stands for Canadian Artist Representation, Front des Artistes Canadiens, meaning like the Writers Union, like the Musicians Union, like ACTRA, we represent the views of visual artists. And our offices are in 401 Richmond, so also an amazing building. And my connection to Susan is shortly after they opened the Frontenac Club Inn, they came to the Modern Fuel Artist Front Center, also known as Kingston Artists Association Inc. annual art auction. They bought one of my little paintings. It's hanging over the piano. And I got to see it because I went to see Elizabeth Darcy, which was a fabulous play. So I was very excited for that connection. And I had a friend who lived in that building when it was just, apartments. So that's the beauty of arts community and the interconnectivity. And I find that Canada, it's not just Kingston's arts community, it's very small. We're really a village, right? Like you know people and you meet people and you have these connections. And so this is sort of folding into my questions as opposed to comments. There's two thoughts that occur to me, and one is in terms of Kingston, well, in terms of Toronto, I have this question is it an issue of critical mass? Like Toronto is the big fish, the ocean, Toronto, Kingston is the village. We like to say we're a small city, but really we're just a big town. And can we pull off something like that here? Because I think Kingston's still quite small. I mean, yes, this space and these two spaces is starting to bring that together, but Clark's got a point. Like with no food and booze, it's going to be hard to sustain. And I don't, it's a lifeblood. It's nurturing ourselves, food and not necessarily booze, but So there's this question I have about critical mass, and the other one is about one of the things about Gladstone and 401 Richmond is their industrial buildings. And Kingston did this really weird thing. It tore down most of its industrial buildings, its old industrial buildings. There's very few of them left. We have the woolen mill, and that's kind of about it, right? The S&R building, and those have been repurposed for mostly big commerce. So, the woolen mill was a space where artists had art studios, and then it got gentrified, and the artists got pushed out. And artists are small business people, and often a lot of activity happens and it's funded by the artists. I always say that the #1 funder of the arts are artists themselves. And yes, we talk about how do businesses make money, but as a person who spent 7 years on the board of CARFAC and as a starving artist, I always say art is my source of debt, not my source of income. I have a day job. I've poured hundreds and hundreds and thousands of dollars into my art practice.
How can you get the Gladstone good?
Well, it's a question to the Kingston artist community. Like, do we have the critical mass to make stuff happen? Is one. That one question. And the other one was, do big industrial buildings matter? Because if we're too spread out, like we're losing the Artel in a couple of months, Yeah. So I just wanted to open up the dialogue and make the connections between like big spaces and little spaces.
Thank you, Sandra.
And talk about it.
Any comments on that, or Christina? Oh, yes. Pass the mic, please. Frank, do you mind passing the microphone?
Hi, my name is Don Mitchell. Sorry, I guess I understand. So I have a question. I'm a Parkdale person, and I came in the late 90s, and I had been working at theater at the time. So Queen West to me is different. There are different sections just over Court, and there was further along, and there was a trendy area, and then Easy and certain restaurants and things started happening down the right of Queen and Roncesvalles. So what my question really is, and it kind of links to that and links to yours as well, I'm intrigued. I've only been in Kingston for 5 years, but what I'm intrigued in is how the Rhino and some of the artist circles that were very close to you supported what you were doing. and how the connections between different buildings. So how does I just heard it, maybe it's distressing, but Artel and different pockets in town, how are they going to collaborate with you to connect us with beer and stuff like that? Because it is easy on Queen West in Toronto. So do you have any ideas, or did you feel supported? There were famous people, but did other artists come out of the woodwork? Did other businesses come out of the woodwork? Outside of that tight circle you talked about that was dedicated to the one building support.
No, those were good. Those are all huge questions. Wow. So if I can untangle a little bit. So one, I think it's really important to think about the economics of buildings. That's a huge factor. 401 Richmond exists because we bought it in 1991, and it was very inexpensive. Because the building had gone into receivership. Gladstone was also inexpensive. However, the Gladstone was incredibly expensive to renovate. And so the Gladstone has the benefits and the curses of being a business. So I'm just hearing that idea about like, well, what do we do about cheap space? And that's always going to be hard, and you have to, there's going to be always a million economic factors pushing things. I think the other question is a little bit about hubs, like this idea. So we're sitting in an arts hub, but what's interesting about the Gladstone is it's sort of a de facto hub. It's not actually an artist hub. This is an actual artist hub. Like, there's not-for-profit spaces, there's public spaces, there's organizations here, whereas the Gladstone is a business that almost acts as a de facto hub. So part of that definitely came, in my case, came from my own personal experience in the arts community. That was where, I had at that point been in the artist community in Toronto for like 15 years, so I had a lot of connections, and I had already been doing a lot of arts organizing. So I was personally bringing a lot of my contacts. But I think that's how hubs kind of work in the first place. It's like those synergy points. Like you just, I don't want to work with somebody, and you put it together and you make it work, and the first one's not very perfect, but then you're starting something, you're pushing that ball forward. So in the Parkdale situation, I think that there was a general energy going on. So for example, when I started up, my friend who I went to art school with owned the business next door at the Beaver. And so, there we were talking, oh man, I haven't seen you since art school. We're suddenly small business owners beside each other. So there's just those personal connections. I think also in a town like Kingston, I think the advantage that you have is there is a really important historic hub here. There's a built form that is similar, it's built at different times, but there was a similar boom, like those pictures of the downtown core here, that could be Queen Street. So I think it's sort of then, how do you turn your business area into a hub? You have actually a tourist advantage over Toronto in a weird way. Toronto will attract people for business, but they're just starting to come for tourism in Toronto. There's like Tourism Toronto has put together the missing link between culture and tourism. Before, probably 15 years ago, Tourism Toronto didn't think that the culture was so important. And then they started to look at the economics, and they were like, my goodness, the Pride Parade brings a lot of money into town. Oh, it looks like Caravana's rather successful. I think they started to be like, oh, there's a larger story here. So I think that, sometimes it's those synergistic things, like the right person will get onto the tourism board in Kingston and be like, you know what, if we put together, so I think that some of those things are the natural pieces, and then there's the more structural pieces of you have to get together and go to people and say, hey, we need this, we need money, we need to add a piece in. So I don't know if that quite answered.
Just a quick comment, echoing what Clark said. Had
adding one more element that's really important is transportation and parking. This location is tough.
Just, sorry, do you mind repeating that? I don't think the people behind me.
Oh, sure. I said, adding one more piece to the puzzle that's desperately needed, and I don't know how it reached its point to today, is transportation and parking. Parking here is beyond which I could ever expect this hub not to have, and it doesn't have it. So I think there has to be some cry. John's smiling. I think there has to be some cry for some help somewhere in the city to allow that to happen so this place can be vibrant. Thank you.
Thanks for your presentation. Sort of a quasi-philosophical question here. The ability for risk, I like how you mentioned risk, and I wonder, are spaces for risk more prevalent in privately owned entities than more city-funded areas? So the ability to take risk in a city-funded entity, is it more difficult, or would you? Is there a difference, basically? It's something that I'm kind of considering. I'm fairly new to Kingston, so I've come along and seen this as it's been built, and I'm excited about it, but there's certain questions I also entertain privately, sometimes publicly, like now.
Kevin Rogers, Director of Minor Fuel, just down the hall. Has an amazing Vapors concert coming up on Saturday.
That's also a really interesting question. And I guess there's always that element of like you're in a public space that, because a public space is engaging in an idea of inclusivity that is more structured than in a private space. There's the advantages and disadvantages. So there are advantages of accessibility and opening things up, and then there's the disadvantage of like, you can't just like, I was gonna mention something outrageous, but think of the crazy, close your eyes and think of the craziest thing. And that might not be something that's respectful of everybody in the space, so it might not be appropriate for a public space. So yes, there's gonna be those questions. But I think one of the things then is you can turn to your actual city to look for those places, or your countryside. And I think actually that's an interesting thing that's been happening in Toronto and I think many cities like Toronto and in North America as well, where there's a lot of like, there's the sort of lack of urban planning sometimes opens up these opportunities. So it's like this derelict space in between X and X. Nobody's there because, you know, we get so expansive that they become fertile spaces for artists. It's like, well, let's do an outdoor public screening, or let's do this intervention, or let's do, so it may not be in a structured space. You might not find that wild piece, but you might go across the street.
Questions, comments? Yes. Sorry, there was two. Okay, Diane, and then Lynn at the back. Just one second.
Hi, I just wanted to ask about your business model on your second floor. For your events planning, do you run it like we do at the Tett? Do you have charges for the rental space? Do all the artists get paid for the arts events? And do you rely on sponsorship at all?
Diane Fitzel, President of the Kingston Arts Council.
Yes, and both and all. So the business plan is like very ad hoc, so it has to, you know, I have a business plan for that flex space, but it changes like by the minute. So partnership is incredibly important. We rely on it a lot of times, and so each event like arts event that so most of the time, yes, it's a rental space. People come in and rent the space. And with artists, we have a myriad of styles that we try to work with. So, and they're sort of all specific to each event. And they sort of weigh out and balance out a whole bunch of different concerns. So sometimes we have an art show. We have one called That's So Gay, and it's our Pride show, and it's discourse around the LGBTQI issues and ability, and every year sort of it's different. The Gladstone donates the space for that. We also donate the curator's fee, and so that's a part of our side of the partnership. But our curator alone goes to the arts councils and tries to get money for the artists. So that can only happen on the times when they are successful. So like that's one model. Another model, so for Come Up to My Room, for example, the artists do pay to be in that show. But we have a ticketed fee for it, but we provide a massive service to the artists as well. So they are supported by their curator. They get proper photography for the show. We bring in 4,000 people into the show over a 4-day period. It's my job to go out and make sure that curators come through, editors come through. There's like a service piece to that, so we're not like, hey, just pay to be in the space, whatever. But them paying to be in the space, make sure that we can run that show. We run that show on a shoestring. There's just a million different ways. Every time it's different. Some artists have before paid to be in the space, and it's much like in a gallery space. So for example, the advantage of paying to be in the space rather than being part of one of these shows is that we have a really good reputation. So we're considered a lot like other galleries, but we don't take any commission fees. So if you sell your painting, you get your money. So people weigh that out. They are like, you know what, no, I'd rather go with the gallery. We have a nice relationship. My gallerist finds people for me. No, I'd rather go it alone, be here. But what we're able to support with that fee for the space, we have all these added benefits that come with being at the Gladstone. So one, you have like our 8,000 million Twitter followers. You have all of our, experience from our, so there's like things that you get with it. So it's always difficult. It's damn hard to run the thing, but we also make sure that there's always a balance. So would never be like, have an opaque situation with an artist where it's like, here's just the fee, whatever. There's always like a balance piece in that. And then also, there's also a lot of partnerships. So like we do partner with the Goethe Institute. They rent the space. They bring in the artists. We do this, So it's just any possible way you can think. It's so, it's adaptive. It's complicated. And we have to ask ourselves questions a lot of the time, like, should we separate, become a foundation, and be in the space and start to run for public money? Is that good for us? Is that good for the community? Is that, so it's deep. Gosh, we could talk about that forever. But I don't think at any point it's always incredibly respectful of the artist. Always, 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 always.
That's good. Lynn, do we trust these people to pass you the microphone?
Or I should shout? Can you hear me?
Let's pass it back. Frank's going to hear it.
Now remind me not to shout. I think, now I've been to the Gladstone Estate. They're fabulous. And been to the Come Up to My Room. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, you also had various artisans' works. There was jewelry and stuff for sale. I can get a couple of the, maybe.
Yeah, it might have been a coinciding show as well.
And, but I guess what I'm sort of mulling over, and this isn't very well formulated, is the place of retail. And you also have had some artisans' works and artists' work for sale in your lobby.
Yeah.
If you were for it.
Yeah.
My daughter was one of them. So a place like this, there's, well, besides not being able to get any food or drink, there's, people come through, want to buy, usually want to, there's a great opportunity for that. And yet downtown we do have arts businesses. And in what way do you see the role of being able to give actual bucks to the artists and artisans being part of what an arts hub can do? What could happen here, perhaps? How can this link with the people downtown who aren't subsidized, from what I know by the city, to just keep their businesses going? How do you see that? Because you have, of course, other businesses along Bean Street too that are retail, so people can get that hit of, I want a little piece of this art action. How does that work?
Those are also very good questions.
Thanks, Clark.
We need to have someone needs to take notes.
You have a video camera.
Yeah, no, that's excellent questions. And I guess that's the unique space that the Gladstone inhabits being a business, is that part of the retail piece is always on display. There's no time when that's not part of the equation. So we don't run like an artist-run center where we get funding and then we're showing work that maybe isn't for buying but for thinking about. There's always some mix in there. So, I mean, I guess that's questions that an arts hub has to ask themselves, like what role does retail play in this? I always like the examples of, I'm drawn to events, festivals, and so I think like those are great times where you can make something really impactful. So we're gonna have the jewelry weekend in Kingston, if you come, and it's 4 days, and so everybody files in here and you have your table, and so people know that they can come. It's a destination, and they got their, So those can sometimes be weighed, and rather than like somebody's paid for a little spot to have their jewelry and nobody comes for 300 days of the year, 350 days of the year, and they're crying. And then, I mean, festivals also work well for businesses too, because, there's always in a downtown port, we're going to have the festival of shoes. And, everybody will come down and it's shoe weekend, So sometimes those things are good for galvanizing.
Yes.
I wanted to go back to Sandra's point, there you are, about critical mass, because, and this is just an observation on my part, coming back to Kingston 5 years ago, for a community this size, how incredibly siloed it is. And I think what we're trying to do with an event like this and the initiative where Art Meets Business is trying to break down those silos and focus on relationship building. And I would think we do have the critical mass if we can collectively take on the responsibility to try and break down those silos and build relationships. And I mean, I've heard time and again how much, I'm over generalizing here, people in the West End pride themselves on hating the downtown and not wanting to come downtown. And I think that that's a real issue. And I mean, I'm guessing, Christina, that a lot of the people who come to the Gladstone are because they want that association with what's going on. They're not necessarily artists themselves or formal arts patrons, but there's a vibe, there's a kind of energy that they want to tap into. And I think that's what we really need to work on collectively here in Kingston, is how do we energize and create an enthused community who will leave the West End or leave the East End and come to here or come downtown or go to the West End or go north to sort of experience the kind of activity that's going on. And I often feel like there's more producers in Kingston than there are audiences. There's incredible creativity here, so how do we energize people that want to participate, and then we will have that sustainability because people will want to be part of what's going on because it is so compelling. So, I mean, that's a challenge for us, and I put it out to a challenge for all of us, that it really is the relationship building piece to make people value what they've got access to in this community. That's cool.
Maybe a couple more and we'll wrap up. Okay. Who put their hand up first? Okay. Cool. You look like you need business.
I'm just a citizen who likes art of all forms. I don't have any formal talent per se. Thanks for your presentation. Fascinating. You really made this your life, right? You really went after it. So my question is, did you have a model for what you wanted to achieve when you went in? Like, was there something in New York or London or Paris or Montreal that you were saying, oh, I'd like to take a crack at something like that? Or did you just say, okay, well, I'm going to go for it and see what happens? Good question.
Thanks, man.
Well, for me, I think it was more the latter, that I was part of a really vibrant scene in Toronto that I was very connected to as part of my life. And so I couldn't imagine almost another way to take on this business than to go to my community and build it up. And I know it sounds funny to be here and then say, oh, talk about Toronto a lot, because I know that can get, seem like, oh, well, we've got it all sorted out. But I think that that's really untrue. I think that in Toronto, like in any place, we're trying to figure something out. And I think what I bring to the table a little bit differently than maybe some other people is that I really love Toronto. I'm from Toronto. I believe in urban planning and the city and how we're going to take it on. And so I wanted to, it was sort of for the love of my city that I wanted to do this thing and connect with my people. And I think that that's a really valid place to work from. And I think that just to the point that you're saying, it's like sort of taking, like, you're a community. You're not just a bunch of random people in a room together. And that working together to do something, sometimes you can be accused of preaching to the choir, but I think it's imagining that beacon thing instead. It's like you're building something that you all believe in, that you're all connected to. There's reason that you're in Kingston rather, like I just heard all of you come from Parkdale to Kingston. It's like, why are you here? There's a connection. We're sitting actually on the lake here, which you can't even do in Toronto anymore. So, there's these important historic, the university, the lake, the built form, the arts, there's these reasons that you're here rather than somewhere else. And there's probably something in the water here too. There's like a kind of arts community that you are. And I think that that's why you're here, that's what you love. And it's tapping into that piece. It's like, what do you love about it? What are the connections between all of you? And using that, that word beacon, creating that as a beacon for people to come to. Because I think that, I'm going to just go on for 1 second, but I was at this arts discussion once, and John Bentley Mays, who's a writer in Toronto, writes about art and architecture, was part of this panel, and I had said, like, oh, are we just preaching to the choir, or like, we don't seem to be drawing anybody else to us. This was like 10 years ago. And he was like, I don't care. He's like, I grew up in he grew up in the South in a very negative, conservative community where there was no arts. And he said, when I found the artist community, I stuck to it like glue. And it sort of turned around my thinking. It was like, rather than trying to reach out to a nebulous group of people who may or may not exist, it's becoming a lightning rod for other people who are like-minded to come to you. And always creating that accessibility and that openness, and that accessibility piece of like going out and finding who are, you're talking about bringing people together. Sometimes that's an action. It's like some of you are those kinds of thinkers who are like, who would be good to bring in? You know what? We don't have enough representation from this group of people. Who do we know? And it's that kind of thinking that, bringing people in, creating accessibility, but also you can't be all things to all people. You're not going to draw anybody to that. So who are you as a beacon? Don't use my brain.
I promise I won't. Inspiring. Okay, John, this is, you have this well. This may be the last word. And I want to continue the conversations. Helen, do you have a question too? Okay, you don't have the last word, John. I'm going to give it to Helen now. And then I really want this conversation to continue, like, you know, in person. Like, we'll just, you know, turn again, mingle and talk to each other in person, and hopefully, you know, meet Christina and the musicians are going to have the final word, actually. But John and Helen, and then the musicians can come back up. Okay, send us home.
I live here, but I just got back from 2 weeks in Parkdale. And I was on a little writer's retreat, and I borrowed a friend's apartment while she was away. And I belong to the Playwrights Guild of Canada, and I hadn't been to their office since they were on Spadina, so I went to their new office, which is in 401 Richmond. And I almost didn't get there because of the gallery downstairs, and just wandering around the building. And a whole lot of different arts and culture groups, theater groups. I think Theatre Ontario's in there, Actors Equity Association, and Playwrights Guild. And I'm thinking, why doesn't Kingston have some? Oh, right, duh, we do. It's now the Tett and the Bader, I think, as a hub. And I agree we need the cafe, and I agree we need the parking. But the beautiful thing about a place like that is people can kind of lean out their doors and yell down the hall at each other and cross-pollinate in the same space. And it just gave me a vision of what this could become. So you can thank your sister for that.
Mine is a bit more of a comment than it is actually a question. My first name is Helen, and I'm with Kingston Community Health Centers. We recently opened a new building, and we actually became a landlord in the Rideau Heights area. So we took basically what would be a derelict strip mall that had basically a corner store and a small restaurant in it, and we were looking for a new place, and we had land beside us. The city helped us with that, and basically we're now a landlord of this building. But what was really quite interesting in terms of bringing business and community together was we had a couple of community meetings, and it was so important to the community that this corner store that had been a cornerstone in the neighborhood for years remained, and how important that was. And so now we just recently had a new tenant come in. We're actually opening a pharmacy, which kind of fits well with the health center. But here now we've got this whole area that's been, like, we've transformed an area that was really derelict, and that's pretty exciting stuff for me. The other comment that I had is, with some of that programming or some of the stuff that we do at the health center, we've been able to start a program called Rising Artists. And we have, every Saturday morning, we have a group of about 15 really eager kids learning to play drums. And it's been with the support of the Community Foundation. And what has been really interesting is that the kids performed at a winter carnival. And then we had the folks come in from our multicultural festival, and we had taiko drumming. And the kids that got to see this drumming, it was just so amazing. So for me, what's really exciting and a comment is thinking about going forward with, there's a plan with the city with the rejuvenation of the Wally Elmer Arena is going to be coming down, and we're going to be opening a community center, and there's going to be some opportunity for performing space. So for me, when I think about hubs, I know this is a great space, but for me, my head goes there, and opening opportunities for kids in that neighborhood that we're just starting to do around arts is really exciting for me, and forging those things. So that's just a comment.
And Joe's Mills Music Learning Library is involved in that as well. And that was actually brought up last night, you know, the importance of not waiting for people to come to you. But so yeah, I think thank you very much, everyone. That was a great discussion. Thanks for your comments, Christina. And I'm going to invite the musicians back up to send us on our way. While they're sitting down, I'd just like to again thank the City of Kingston's Leading Change initiative that made this happen, along with Visit Kingston and Kingston Accommodation Partnership. Thank you, Murray. I should mention, I've been putting people on the spot tonight. Murray did this amazing 6-hour parking shift as a volunteer in like -30 degree weather for the whole shebang, so that was pretty amazing. Also, you know, please pick up one of Danielle's CDs of String Theory on your way out. Members of the String Theory project will be at the door there. Sign up for a KC membership as well as you leave. Thanks to the Kingston Canadian Film Festival, the first event, I guess, well, this is the first event, but tomorrow, 1 o'clock in this very room, the Kingston Canadian Film Festival, let's see, throughout the weekend of screenings, receptions, and free workshops, tomorrow, here in the Malting Tower, they're offering a free panel on the intersection of film and interactive gaming, which sounds pretty cool, with David Footman, the acclaimed cinematic director. So visit kingstonfilmfest.com for more information. How about we thank our building manager and outreach coordinator, Shannon Brown and John Mursky, for making this and we got an Arts Expo coming up on the weekend of May 9th. Yep. Yeah, so keep tuned to tettcenter.org. So here we go. String Theory, Daniel Lennon, another round of applause. Thanks very much for coming.
you.